Greetings, friends. If you follow online right-wing dissident content, you might be familiar with the channel like Jay Burden. He's a young guy who has conversations with all kinds of people in the dissident right and overlapping spheres. You might be familiar with Academic Agent. The two of them had a conversation on episode 193 of the Jay Burden podcast, in which they discussed Israel-Palestine. And Academic Agent had a view which I took some contention with. I guess he's a bit of a contrarian, but he's counter-signaling people in the dissident right who are saying, stay out of this fight. Let these people fight. He's saying that if you say that, then you are weak and submissive to the tribe that rules over us. And he has some points. I'm willing to be convinced, but I don't think he actually makes a good argument over the course of this podcast. And Jay Burden doesn't really push back. He's not really skeptical enough, in my opinion. He could have been a bit more critical.
But I thought it would be useful to present to you my initial reaction to both the Israel-Hamas war and also the recent campus protests, and then you can sort of disagree from there. So my first opinion in looking all of this is effectively that of American isolationism. Right, this is not my problem. I will not get overly invested in this. And so when we see the arm of the state basically clubbing lefty protesters on universities, well, I hate both of these people, so let them fight. So I'm curious, what is your response to that, and then your take more generally?
So my response to that is the response that the supporters of Israel want you to have, which is why the supporters of Israel who are embedded within the so-called DR have pushed that message strongly, including, but not limited to, Curtis Yarvin, BAP, various people in his sphere. I mean, it's basically been the dominant messaging from people like that who, let's just say, have a vested interest in this issue, even if you don't. And in fact, it's been crystallized recently by a meme of this guy chilling out in the sun, reading a book. You've seen that meme? And this is
he's sort of a muscular young guy getting a suntan.
Yeah, and this has been kind of valorized as the correct and based way to be. The problem with that is that this, underneath that, my caption would be, this guy is so base that he's willing to tolerate the total control and power of this group that we're talking about. And he's not going to do anything about it. I mean, that's the position. That's the base and red pill position. Since when? I mean, there has never been a better opportunity. It's essentially mainstream at this point. Figures are far more mainstream than either of us openly discuss this, all the way up to Tucker Carlson, Douglas McGregor, and people like that. Judge Knapp on a daily basis discusses this issue with people who have basically mainstream profiles like Jeffrey Sachs and all of the various spooks he has on. My view is that the situation that has happened with Israel has revealed in a stunning way the extent to which one thesis of American power and influence is true.
They start out the conversation by talking about this meme. I haven't seen the meme myself, but they describe it. I think that the meme it could have the right effect, but it's also dangerous. I would agree with Academic Agent. For me, it's just dangerous because it could encourage a submissive attitude in general, to not want to fight for some greater cause, to be the liberal bug man in his pod, and incapable of anything, having erased or surrendered all agency. And this is something I think is a theme with Academic Agent, where he ascribes agency and where he doesn't ascribe agency. He ascribes all this agency to the power structure of that tribe. But the BLM Marchers, he will say, well, you shouldn't really have a beef with them because they're just pawns of this other group above them, which of course is true.
The dipshit 18-year-old communist actually has no power, right? I mean, this is simple stuff. I mean, I would also say, by the way, that I would apply this to every other field too. And I've said it before. You should not direct your anger, let's just say, at black people per se. They're going to be who they are, right? You should address your anger at the power structures that allow this to happen and who weaponize them against you, right? So keep your eye on Sauron, not on the orcs. It's pretty simple stuff.
But I don't agree with ascribing no agency to the pawns, because they're not really pawns, they're human beings. We all have agency. So if you let Satan into your heart, other people can show you options and persuade you of things that satisfy what's in your heart. You will follow leaders and dictators who may do terrible things. But that's not really to say that you're totally a pawn at the end of the day. You go along with this stuff. So we do have a spiritual beef with the BLM people, just as we have a spiritual beef with that tribe. It's not like, oh, well, it's just that one tribe. It's not quite that simple. Satan fills people's hearts throughout the world.
We all had theories, and we still have theories, about what we call the regime and the different parts of the regime, who has ascendancy, what their different agendas are, who they are, and so on and so forth. And one narrative that has always been around is essentially to say that the American government is controlled by the lobby. John Mearsheimer wrote a book, The Israel Lobby in U.S. Foreign Policy, back in 2007. It seemed for a while that was taking the back seat to things like the World Economic Forum, the demons in Davos, as Dr. Steve Turley calls them, eats the bug, Klaus Schwab, the whole COVID agenda, all the rest of it. Since Ukraine started, but certainly since October the 7th, I would say that a lot of that stuff has been dialed back or has kind of gone underground. And the Zionist part of the American government, which is basically just the American government as far as I can see, has come to the fore. And they've essentially revealed that there is basically nothing that Israel can do that they will not defend to the hilt, including mass murder. They gave them, what was it, a package of $29 billion worth of weapons, and the full arm of the state, all the police, all of the various arms of the security apparatus have come down on the criticism of Israel in a way that we just haven't seen. And let me take you back to the based guy sunbathing and reading a book saying, this is not my problem, okay? Those same police who are beating up and pro-Palestine protesters right now, 4 years ago took a knee. The various governors are talking about calling out their state guards, and there's even been talk of calling out the National Guard to break up these protesters who are being threatened with suspensions from the universities, arrests, and so on and so forth. So basically a complete suspension of First Amendment rights, which is meant to be sacrosanct in the US Constitution. Now, of course, all of us know that those things never really existed anyway. But still, in the minds of many Americans, these things do exist. But because of the Schmittian exception granted to this one group, all of that gets suspended in a moment of crisis. And in the moment of crisis, as per Schmitt, you get to see power reveal itself.
He makes this comment that the cops who are cracking down on these student protesters for Gaza, those cops would have been taking the knee for BLM 4 years ago. Okay, what's your point? They're those cops who were our enemies then, and they're our enemies now. And the BLM protesters were our enemies then, and now the Gaza protesters, adjacent to the BLM in some way. They're not our friends, they're our enemies. They are not going to be on board with a return to Christian values in the West. They're not going to be on board with that, the majority of them, because that's not their religion. So they're not our friends, they're our enemies too. What exactly am I supposed to think about the cop bending the knee? What, so now we have to fight the cops now? It's going to work in the streets, but you didn't say we should really be in the streets? What is that comment supposed to mean? Okay, let's grant that one enemy is bigger than the other. And that he's relying on the idea that this lobby is more of an issue than the COVID lobby, than the World Economic Forum, than the neocons or whatever. Like, I'd be the first one to admit that a certain tribe has all the positions of power in the financial system, in the media and all that. But I'm not going to believe that that one group alone was responsible for the implementation in a real, practical, in-your-face, literally on-your-face sense of these policies that impacted us all throughout the Western world and beyond. No, there was buy-in from that group, of course. You might even say they continue in a leading role, but that had buy-in amongst all the peoples of the world. It was a spiritual deception. Our own peoples were completely bound up in that satanic frenzy of irrationality. And our own people, like our own neighbors, like, were enforcing that stuff. Obviously, politics is like that. We're manipulated all the time. I'm manipulated. All of that stuff is happening. People are controlling us. But to think that we don't have agency is a mistake. We always have agency. We can always come to the truth. It starts in your heart. People can find their ways out of cults and communism and come to truth. They can do it on their own. But it takes them to have the heart to do so.
You get to see power reveal itself. The truth, like who decides the exception. And as far as I can see, every single exception is made for this group. It has confirmed things that people have been talking about for decades in America, with all of the receipts you could ever want in broad daylight, in a manner that is stunning, and in a manner that if you would have told any of us that it would get to this point 2 years ago, we would have said, you guys are mad. And yet it's happened. And so if your response to that is to say, oh, actually, it's not my problem, you're basically leaning into the frame that the status quo wants, and you are tacitly supporting the regime by adopting that frame, because it is helpful for them, it is not helpful for us. It is helpful to the GOP, it is not helpful to us. It is helpful to all of the various nodes of containment in the system, it is not helpful to us. So I recommend that you reject that frame wherever possible and highlight and promote people who openly call out and expose their power and call them on their bullshit. That is my view. That is the correct thing to do. The complacent, weak, and cowardly thing to do is to adopt the other frame.
Why would you assume that because you don't want to fight here, therefore it's just like, well, no more fighting anymore? That could be the implication of a meme, but I don't think that's fair to assume that's why. That's you're a coward because you don't want to let your enemies fight. You want to join one of your other enemies because the other enemy is a bigger enemy. Is that academic agent's argument? There's this jump they make, which the whole podcast is a kilter. What's the word? Like it's not actually addressing the meme, what was in the meme. It kind of develops into a thing about Zionism, where the dissident right is infected with Zionism. But that's a separate question. We know that. Everyone knows that. The people who are saying this isn't our fight, we know that as well. Like, we know the dissident right is infected with Zionism. That's a separate question. So the question is, what do we do? Okay, we just counter-signal Israel. Haven't we already been doing that? Isn't that that's been happening already? Oh, but there's more counter-signaling going on now because the mainstream is getting involved in this. But the dissident right has already been doing that for years.
And let me just say something about instincts a second, because it was initially my instinct too, right? Because, you know, I have a personal reason to hate these people, as you may know, especially the BLM protest of 4 years ago. You know, I was outspoken about that at the time, and I paid personal and professional costs for it. Let's just say that. So, you know, there's part of you that kind of desires revenge, and for that revenge to be taken out on your enemies, regardless of who is doing it. Okay, I understand the instinct perfectly well. The trouble is that they understand that instinct too. And when you're dealing with people who are adept at manipulation, of course, they play on things. They naturally play on things that appeal to your instincts. And, you know, if we're talking about the influence of certain people, they have consistently done this throughout their time in ascendancy, playing on your instincts. And, you know, well, a much easier realm to see it in is in something like pornography, let's just say. You know, men get turned on by women, so it's an easy in, right? So I would say that it requires discipline and control not to be led astray by their manipulation. Everybody is aware of the concept of red meat. In this country, the Tory party are expert at throwing their base a couple of slabs of red meat once in a while. But of course, we know through all of the work that we've done and all of the conversations that we've had that these people are our enemies. The Tory party are our enemies. The GOP are your enemies. And certainly the people they answer to are. They are the ones who are receiving the massive funding, the lobby money, the backing of all the institutions, and so on. Those are the things that we're against, so we should be against those.
Like, he never really explains what he means by the alternative. Like, okay, he means to disable the dissident right-wing meme that this is not our fight, don't get involved in this, let our enemies fight. No, he wants to disable that meme. I understand that part of his message, but I don't understand the alternative. Like, okay, so you're saying this is our fight, we do get involved. But then he says, well, I don't mean protesting with them in the streets. Okay. He seems to suggest continuing to counter-signal that country, counter-signal their narrative. I guess by making posts and online videos and posts on X, I guess. Like, at the end of the day, we're just people on the internet. Academic agent. At the end of the day, we're just people on the internet. And his channel is very successful. Huge channel. He's a successful guy. But like, what is the political force to which academic agent is attached? He's talking to people on the internet. What could he actually move? What could I actually move? Not much, but whoever is going to succeed is going to be the religious person in the real communities. That's all I know. Because that's all the average person is going to know when life gets tougher, as it already is. Their community, their real community. And that's where real power lies.
So, yeah, that is my argument in a nutshell, Jay. And I feel that, as always with these things, people will instinctually not want to agree because it's easier not to, but ultimately it is the right thing to do at this time. That is my view. Now, I'm not saying become a grug and start acting like the worst elements, you know, in our midst. That would be unwise, right? But there is a way of drawing attention to these things without behaving in that manner and without leading into low IQ bigotry and, you know, stupid tropes and memes and that sort of thing. This is happening. It is what it is. And we shouldn't be afraid of pointing that out, especially at a moment where they're vulnerable and feeling like they're in need of support. There's been an active process to try to court people like us. They have a huge interest in that. And one of the reasons for that is because they need people who are prepared to work with them. They always need alliances. And I'm just saying, deny it. deny them any wins, deny them any ins, stay on top. Now, that is not saying join the protests or become obsessed with the Palestinian cause or anything like that. I'm just saying that at this time, when you say, oh, I hate both sides, it's got nothing to do with me, you're actually doing the work of containment and helping, giving a kind of carte blanche to this group and basically saying, yeah, actually, I'm all right with you guys being in power, controlling my speech, making Texas and Florida and all these places. What did Greg Abbott say? I want to make this the safest place in the world for this group, and pass laws controlling what you are allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. This is the base thing to support? Come on now. So that's my view.
But I would agree that we do need allies. The question is, who do you form allies with? Can you really form allies with the Gaza protesters? Like, how? Just explain to me how. If we're not with them in the streets, then in what meaningful sense are you with them? If you're not able to march and be in their presence, then in what meaningful sense are you with them? Are you saying, well, we're going to make videos to counter Israel, but we'll make sure that we're not in any way associating ourselves with the Gaza protests? I mean, yeah, maybe that's a fine line you could kind of do, I guess. That's just making online content. As much as the Gaza protesters may be our enemies, they are truly fighting that certain group, that they are truly fighting that certain tribe right now. I will hand it to them. I mean, are they really fighting though? Maybe I should reconsider this. Are they really fighting? Because they're not, actually. They're not. If you look at the protests, from what I've seen, they're fairly tame. They're not like what would have happened during the BLM riots. During the BLM riots, people died. Lots of stuff caught fire. It was chaos. These Gaza protests, from what I've seen, are mostly on university campuses. There are other events that aren't. And I'm sure there have been some crimes, but it's not on the same level at all as what was going on with BLM. In conclusion, I'll just say that there's been so much commentary and discussion over these videos that have come out of these student protests. This commentary on our side, I've noticed, people are drawing all sorts of conclusions, sometimes radically different from one another. Like, some are saying this is great, that white frat boys are coming out and taunting the communist protesters, and then others are saying, no, this is bad, this is going to lead to the left getting the enemy that it wants, at least in the public image, which is always going to be the white male, and they are getting that. And then, of course, was this just standard white fraternities for men? That's also in question. But I'm just using this story as an example. It could go with other content and the discourse on X, because that's where all the discourse is. You notice, like, I go to X for discourse, I engage in discourse, I read, and then I come to YouTube and I like talk about it, right? Because there's no real discourse on YouTube. There is kind of, but like the comment section doesn't seem to work on YouTube anymore for most channels. I don't mean it doesn't physically work, but it's just not really any discourse on YouTube. But I go to X and I talk about it here. But it's really, that's an influential website too, just like YouTube, but just in a different way. Like, that's really where the real discourse is. So many people on our side are drawing all these conclusions, and sometimes they're good conclusions, good insights, but sometimes you see a video, like, do they know some context? Do they know some nuance that I don't know? I mean, maybe, but a lot of the time you see a video, such as the one that people were sharing of the white frat and generally white college people coming out to, I guess, defend their part of the campus from these hooligans. You just see a bunch of noise. You can't make anything of this. It's just a bunch of noise, people shouting here and this, like, oh, someone was making a monkey noise, oh maybe I missed that, or a bunch of noise. Just a bunch of noise and just all this explosion of insights. And some people were even saying, like, this is a great moment, like something's shifting, something's changing. I can find, like, whoa, I didn't catch that. All I saw was a bunch of noise. All I saw was a bunch of confusion and heard a bunch of noise. Hasta luego, amigos.